Hey guys, in today's video, I'm going to try my best and attempt to fill out a prediction here for an electoral college map between Democratic challenger Andrew Yang and current Republican President Donald Trump. And I emphasize try my best because this is the toughest one that I've had to do up to this point in time. Really grappled with how a lot of these different scenarios might play out. And it's tough with Andrew Yang because he's very different than just your traditional Democratic candidate. An outsider. He brings an interesting perspective to the table. He's a relative unknown, and just there's not a lot of data to go off of in terms of polling information. You can see here over at 538, only 3 polls have been taken between Yang and Trump, and they're all from the same source. I like to get multiple sources. These are all just from Harris polls, around 100 sample size here. And you can see Yang losing to Trump by 8 points, 12 points, and 12 points. And a lot of this has to do with very low name recognition. He's at 26, 25, and 27 in contrast to Trump, who's at 38, 37, and 35. Yang has a lot of work to do to try to get his name out there and spread his message, and he's not your traditional type of Democratic candidate. He brings some unique transformative policy ideas to the table, primarily building his campaign around universal basic income. And who's going to be receptive to this type of message? Now, if we take a look at the polling, Yang, I think he's actually doing pretty decently for himself given the situation. He's typically in the about 2 to 3 percentage point range, which you might think, well, that's just absolutely nothing. But considering how many Democrats are running in the 2020 primary and how many established Democratic candidates are polling consistently behind Yang at 0 to 1 percentage point, means that he is effective in some manner. And I think that a lot of his effectiveness comes from politically active younger people online. This kind of feels like the base that he's been able to build up behind his candidacy. And now, can you translate that to have success in a general election? I think he could possibly have a tough time winning over enough older voters to defeat Donald Trump. I think he can do quite well with the younger generation, but when you have transformative policies that are going to rock the boat, change the status quo, these are where older voters tend to go with the safer option, or maybe not even safer is the better way or the best word to use. Maybe I should categorize it more as just somebody who's not going to change the status quo too much, just do tweaks here and there. Maybe somebody more like a Biden, they'd be more receptive to. And we see that in the polling where Biden does very well with older voters, very weak with younger voters, but more transformative figures like a Andrew Yang, like a Bernie Sanders. That's where they tend to get their base from, is from those voters that are younger and don't mind to see the system changed and have that status quo be rocking the boat a bit to have more significant change. So I think Yang would struggle with older voters, and I think that would make it very difficult for him to potentially win enough electoral votes to take down the incumbent. It's not easy beating an incumbent, even somebody who's as unpopular as Donald Trump. So I'm going to start going through and just trying to fill out this map to the best of my ability. Starting here with the state of Texas, I think that Trump would be able to keep this one. He won it in 2016 by around 8 or so percentage points. And for the Democrats to flip Texas, I think there are only 3 possibilities would be Bernie Sanders, Joe Biden, or Beto O'Rourke. Outside of that, I really don't think any of the other candidates would have too much of a chance. It would be an upset in and of itself for those 3 particular candidates, but anyone outside of that, in the polling data at least that we've seen, have been a bit behind those other 3 candidates that have at least been within the realm of being competitive with Trump and trying to flip a state that could very well become purple over the coming decade with those demographics changing. Other areas where I think Trump would also be able to hold on and keep would be Georgia as well as Florida here in the Southeast. Florida is always competitive in presidential years, but again, this is a situation where a lot of older voters in the state of Florida, I don't think Yang's transformative type of policies, such as universal basic income, will necessarily play well with these types of voters. Also, Florida in the 2018 midterms, one of the strongest holds here for the Republican Party in contrast to pretty much every other state, particularly in terms of what they were able to not hold on to congressionally. Florida was one of the areas where they actually did quite well, and I think that's a positive sign for Trump going into 2020. So that puts us at 185 to 208. Areas where I think Yang can do well as a Democrat here, continuing the trend here that we've seen out in the Southwest, Nevada, as well as Colorado and New Mexico. I think he would be able to continue to hold those states for the Democrats. They've been making gains, and I think that he would also be able to do well enough there to hold on to areas where Clinton obviously was able to win back in 2016. But Arizona, I think it stays with the Republicans here. It's becoming a purple state, certainly still leaning more so to the Republicans. The Democrats were able to flip a Senate seat there in 2018. I think long term, this is going to become a bluer state every election cycle that we go into. But at this point in time, Trump was able to win it back in 2016 by 3.5 percentage points. And again, the older voters, I think, make a difference for Donald Trump here in the state of Arizona. All right, so now let's go over here to the east. We have North Carolina. Trump won it by about 3.5 percentage points. Yang can potentially make it within that realm of being competitive, but again, I don't think the type of Democratic voter here is going to be a strong enough base to really rally behind Yang to make a huge difference. Now, we saw the last time the Democrats won North Carolina was in 2008. Tremendous African-American support in the state here for Barack Obama, but then Obama actually lost in 2012, receding those electoral votes, and then in 2016, also relatively competitive, but the Republicans were able to claim it. I think it can be a competitive state, but at the end of the day, still giving the lean over to Donald Trump. Now, the state of Virginia, I give as a slight lean to Yang, and this is another one of those tough ones to really grapple with. Now, it does definitely feel like Virginia has been trending in a Democratic direction, but it seems to be more of an establishment Democratic direction than a progressive or transformative type of direction. So I'm not necessarily sure how that plays out with these voters in a Yang-Trump matchup. I think Trump actually could even possibly take the state of Virginia away from Yang. I think it'd be really close, but at the end of the day, still going to be giving the slight lean here to Yang to hold on to the state of Virginia. And New Hampshire, also, I'd still going to give a very slight lean over to Andrew Yang. Out of all these northeastern states, one that can be interesting is New Hampshire, but New Hampshire is kind of one of those states where I feel like they're more receptive potentially to a transformative type of politician. They're early on in the primary process. Yang's going to spend a lot of time there. I think that he could still hold on to the state. Clinton was barely able to do it back in 2016. I think that he would just be able to hold on to it as well. The 2nd Congressional District in Maine giving over to Trump. He actually won it quite convincingly back in 2016. Ranked choice voting might be able to help Yang's chances here, but still, in the end, going to be giving that one to Trump. Now going to Ohio, as well as Iowa. Now, these are two Midwestern states that feel like they are trending a bit more to the Republicans. They're kind of like the Republicans' version of what's happening to the Democrats in the Southwest, where the Democrats are making gains in states like Nevada, Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona. Republicans, on the flip side, have been making gains in recent election cycles in states like Ohio, Iowa. You can also throw Wisconsin in there, as well as Indiana. And Trump, back in 2016, won Ohio by around 8 or so percentage points. Iowa was around 10 or so percentage points after Obama had won those two states in the two prior election cycles. And, you could perhaps make a case, Andrew Yang, he's spending a lot of time in Iowa, an early primary state. Perhaps that could be enough to try to swing the state over to him. But still, at the end of the day, I think that Trump would be able to hold on to it as well as Ohio. So that puts Trump up to 259, which is really close to the 270 needed to get him across the line. I think he also holds on to Nebraska's 2nd Congressional District, just like he was able to do back in 2016. Now, Minnesota, the Democrats absolutely dominated here in 2018, and I actually think they would be more receptive to a more transformative message that Yang brings to the table. They're Bernie lovers here. That's where Bernie did very well back in 2016. It was one of his best states. Hillary Clinton, not a whole lot of love there for her. That's not the type of Democrat, apparently, that Minnesota voters want, because Clinton was barely able to carry the state in 2016. But then in 2018, Democrats just absolutely crushed it in Minnesota. I think Yang would actually be able to do quite well in this particular Midwestern state, and he'd be able to carry that as well as its 10 electoral votes. And also the state of Michigan, it's a tough one. Trump was able to flip it in 2016. It was still extremely close. I think it was 0.3 percentage points. We're talking about very slim margin here. But still, at the end of the day, Michigan is a state in presidential years that tends to go to the Democrats. I think Andrew Yang would be able to hold on and, well, not necessarily even hold on. It would be a flip for the Democrats. But in 2018, the Democrats doing quite well in Michigan, claiming some key congressional seats there in competitive districts. I think that Yang could actually play really well in the liberalized areas in and around University of Michigan and the Ann Arbor area. And then also, of course, you have the massive population centers in the state of Michigan in and around the area of Detroit that I think Yang would do quite well in. So I think he's actually able to keep what's typically a Democratic state in his hands. Now we have two more states here, Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. Trump won both of these states by 0.7 percentage points. And I think it would be extremely close. I actually think that Wisconsin is a little bit tougher of a get at this point in contrast to Pennsylvania, but you could make an argument in a lot of different ways about this. So Wisconsin in the midterms, extremely competitive governor's race. The Democrat was able to just come through by the skin of his teeth. But then they had a Senate race where an incumbent Democrat did very well, winning by double digits, Tammy Baldwin. And Baldwin has more of a progressive leaning for a Democratic senator. So perhaps somebody like a Yang could break through and have success in Wisconsin. And then taking a look at a state of Pennsylvania, the Democrats did extremely well here, winning the governorship, winning the Senate race, all by very convincing margins. But still, at the end of the day, Trump winning these ones by a little bit more of a margin than what he had in Michigan. I think he's just able to keep these two states. And again, you guys, like I said, this is the most grueling map I had to fill out just in terms of trying to figure out who would be able to win these competitive states between Yang and Trump, given it's such a low information situation to come into, and there's not a whole lot of comparables with Andrew Yang in terms of other Democratic candidates that you can say, well, his coalition is the same as X candidate's coalition, so that's why he's going to be doing good or bad in these other states, because that candidate would be able to do good or bad in some of these states. But at this point, I think I would give the lean to Donald Trump, given the unknown of Andrew Yang's candidacy, the unknown of how popular his policy positions would be on a national general election stage. We'll see how it all plays out. It's very unlikely that Andrew Yang is going to go on and win that Democratic nomination, so it's unlikely that this particular scenario will play out. But perhaps we can get more polling in the coming year to paint more of a picture of how a Yang-Trump matchup might actually play out. We'll see if we get that polling data, and if it's enough to be relevant, I'll throw together another one of these prediction videos. But at this point, I think I would give the slight lean to Donald Trump here in a matchup against the challenger, Andrew Yang, going with the incumbent Republican President Donald Trump. So that's going to wrap this one up, guys. Thanks for stopping by. Consider subscribing for more, and I hope to see you guys back here for my next video.